my god! I lost!
Yeah, so if you weren't able to tell, I like Suzuka just a little bit. She's one of those nice characters that I just have a little bit of affection for, and was actually the main reason when I first started playing the game that I summoned on like the whole CCC banners, because I didn't care about any of those other characters. All I wanted was my cute fox waifu, and that's all there was. That's just the way it is, which is all the more reason that I'm extremely salty that we don't have the Christmas version of Suzuka in the game right now. I know Lasengel, you know, we keep talking about them, the new people that took over FGO. If they want to win me over, there are two things that they have to do. One, you gotta either bring in some of these FGO arcade servants over to the actual mobile game, or give us the costumes at the very least, or you can give me the Fate Extella and the Fate Extella Link costumes, port those over to FGO, and I will be a happy, happy man, because I don't know if you guys have seen some of those costumes, but they are chef's kiss. Now, before we begin the video, I mentioned this a couple of days ago, but I'm actually going to be hosting a Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel tournament through my Discord, which is linked down in the description down below. If you would like to enter that tournament and potentially win a prize if you're able to win, then make sure you go to the Discord, go to the announcements, kind of scroll up a little bit, read the rules for the tournament, DM me if you want to enter, and then hopefully I'll see you guys next weekend, where I'm planning on streaming the entirety of the tournament, probably over the course of next weekend, because it's probably going to be quite a bit with how many people are starting to sign up now. But I would like to see as many of you guys show up there as possible. Just a little thing to announce here at the beginning of the video for those that are interested. Other standard YouTube intro stuff, like the video, subscribe, all that good stuff. I'm partnered with LD Emulator and Loot Cakes, all that good mumbo jumbo. Twitch link down in the description down below as well. With all that being said though, let's just talk about Suzuka, because I want to talk about my foxy waifu over here, okay? That's all I gotta do, or rather all I want to do. So let's go ahead and start off with her hits, which she pretty much just has the standard solid buster card setup, where she's got the one quick, the double arts, and the double buster. This is very imperative for buster servants to have, and is probably just the correct way to build them, because they can still buster Brave Chain with their NP. They have two arts cards that help them gen their own NP. And when you actually look at the hits and values that Suzuka has for said hits, it's actually quite good. She has a decent star genning stat at 10.2% with 3 hits on her quick card. Unfortunately, only 4 on the extra attack, because the extra attack is a composite card that gens stars, NP, and does big boy damage. And so aside from the quick card, this is going to be the other place that you would normally drop stars, although Suzuka is a bit odd, because as we'll get into with her gameplay, Suzuka actually wants to drop stars with her buster cards, specifically her NP. So if you're finding that you're not dropping enough stars with the quick card and the extra attack and a Brave Chain, just wait till you fire the NP. Her NP gain is fine at 0.57% with 3 hits on both of her arts cards. This means that the extra attack really isn't going to be giving you much NP back, because the natural value for the NP gain is not quite high enough, but it does mean that if you're able to crit on those arts cards, you will actually refund a decent chunk of your NP back, and that's actually very viable with Suzuka's style of gameplay, because as I mentioned, she actually specializes as somewhat of a buster star gen servant. So let's go ahead and look into some of her skills. Starting off with the first skill, and arguably the first skill here is where all the magic happens, because it sets everything up that Suzuka wants to do in a pretty good manner. Now, they did buff this skill, and I think the buff to the skill was absolutely necessary, because they took all of the values and extended the amount of time that she actually has to play around with them, because originally this was just a 40% buster buff with a 50% star gen buff for 1 turn, and while that is definitely a good skill on a 5-turn cooldown, they just absolutely gassed it up after they buffed it, because now it's a 40% buster buff that lasts for 3 instances for 3 turns, and while yes, you could still burn this in 1 buster Brave Chain in 1 turn, if you have a Brave Chain that's like your NP, a buster card, and then an arts card, you still have that last buster hit for the next following turn, so you can get a little bit of extra value in it. And keep in mind, it's still a 40% buster buff, which is just 10% shy of it being a mana burst, so it's very, very high. They extended the 50% crit star generation rate to 3 turns just straight up, which is very solid because it not only means her NP functions as somewhat of a star bomb, but it also greatly helps out her 1 quick card, and actually means she can actually drop a few stars with her buster cards as well. And then finally, they also extended her a bit of an olive branch and gave her 50% crit damage for 3 hits. Same thing with the buster card. If you do just a face card chain where you have 50 stars, you can burn all of this crit damage in 1 turn. But let's say you're a little bit unlucky because FGO is a bit of a finicky game. You fire your NP, a buster card with 100%, and then a quick card with 70%. Well, the buster card crits, that's one of your hits, but the 70% doesn't proc, you still have 2 more hits of crit damage left. So it's a little bit versatile. I like the way they went with building Suzuka, because this actually means she functions as a very strong buster crit servant that's very self-sufficient, and this is all put into the first skill. We then move on to her second skill, which if I'm looking at one of these, this one probably needs to get buffed a little bit because it's a 100% chance to charm 1 male enemy for 1 turn, and it reduces their attack by 20%. Both are only 1 turn, and it's on a 6-turn cooldown. For it being on such a long cooldown, you're really not getting a whole lot. I think there's a few things they could do with this skill if they want to kind of lean into it being a utility skill where it kind of just suppresses the opponent. They could make it just a more broad charm. They could add a defense down onto this, a buster resist down. Something along those lines could actually be very strong. You could also just put an immediate battery on this skill. That would actually help Suzuka out a lot, since they would only really need to give her a 30% battery. Then she becomes pretty viable when it comes to farming as well, and that just adds another dimension to her style of gameplay. They could also throw on like a dodge or something if they want to give her just another form of survivability, because the charm is technically survivability, but it's only against male enemies and if they don't have their own innate debuff resistance or something. So the second skill has some use, but if you're not fighting male enemies, it loses a lot of its value, as a 20% attack reduction for 1 turn probably isn't going to be all that noticeable. I'm sure there's one person that was like, I lived on 37 HP because they were lowered by 20%. You know, good for that person, but that's probably not going to help you out all that much. We then finally have her third skill, which this was probably like just one of her better skills just right off the rip when she released, because it gives her 10% NP every turn for 5 turns. Keep in mind, this is on a 6-turn cooldown, so technically she has a quote-unquote 50% battery over time. It makes her really good for challenge quests because it helps her stay self-sufficient, because you'll essentially have this up all the time. It also gives her Pierce Evasion for 3 turns, meaning she can get around any dodge characters, and keep in mind, she's a Saber, and there are 2 Lancer characters in particular that really like to spam their dodges, so it makes her particularly good for quests like that. And then it also gives her a 20% NP damage buff for 3 turns. Keep in mind, that NP damage buff is going to multiply into her buster buff to give her more damage, because if you're not aware, different buff types in FGO actually multiply into each other. That's why it's better to give yourself a wide variety of buffs instead of just getting like 5 attack buffs or 5 buster buffs. You want to diversify as much as you possibly can. I actually demonstrated the difference of this on stream when we were farming with Lancelot for one of the hunting quests, and it was the difference of, if you double buffed your servant, it was a difference of leaving the enemy with 2,000 HP or leaving them with 50,000 HP left. It was quite a massive gap. Like, you get significant amounts of damage if you're able to double buff. So this is very crucial for Suzuka Gozen, that you can actually get off some pretty solid damage with her. And as I'll show, I guess just moving into the NP, she's actually one of the more damaging AoE sabers in the game. You can look at people like Artoria, who do the most damage, but you gotta remember she's like a 1-pump chump. Shiki's kind of good. Saber Alter does a lot of damage, but she doesn't have all of the same utility that someone like Suzuka has. You could use someone like Altera who's above her, but Altera's kind of cheeks, if I'm being honest. Really, the only good AoE servants that are above her in terms of damage are people like Ibuki, Okita, and Mordred, right? Because they actually do things, which I know I probably offended everyone in the Artoria crowd, especially since I did a video saying she's not bad, which she isn't bad. She is just kind of a 1-pump chump though. So considering how much damage she does for what she can all do, it makes her insanely viable, especially after they buffed her NP, which is an AoE Buster 10-hit NP that's capable of dropping a lot of stars if you have her first skill up, especially if you're pairing her in particular with the homie Merlin, which I do believe she was designed to be used in tandem with Merlin because Merlin gave her a lot of things that she wanted, like an additional Buster buff, an attack buff to multiply into her Buster, and NP damage buff, hard survivability and invincibility, and most importantly, arguably, that big crit star generation buff that Merlin can give people. So she can definitely drop a lot on her own, but if you use her with someone like Merlin, or I don't know, maybe you're feeling extra frisky and you're running her with like Caskill for some reason, you can start to produce a dummy thick amount of stars, but that's not all that her NP does. So her NP is a star bomb, but it also gives her a 20% NP generation buff for 3 turns. This is nice to kind of give her arts cards that slight increase to just make them a little bit better. Because if you're not critting, you're really not genning a whole lot of NP. And then now, if you are getting crits, you're more reliably refunding your NP. So it's just a nice bit of tech that they put on there that really helps her out a lot. But the thing that I'm sure a lot of people mostly care about is the fact that she can stack crit damage on her overcharge effect, and it's at bare minimum going to be 40%, and it's going to top out at 80%. Now, some people may know that I've been talking about this for the past couple of videos talking about Buster Servants, but Buster Servants can help each other get higher levels of overcharge as well pretty easily, with people like Morgan and Himiko being pretty meta servants. And so if you wanted to start stacking like 60 to 70% crit damage with your Suzuka because you thought it'd just be a funny thing to do, you are more than capable of doing that with how broken a lot of these supports are getting. And then also do keep in mind, now that she has the base 50% on skill 1, if you fire the NP, your subsequent crits are going to be having at bare minimum 90% crit damage, which is insane because remember, like Merlin's hero creation is 100%, Scotty's crits are 100%, and you're already getting up to that on her own. No support needed. She can hit these high levels of crits, which is also why I think it's crazy that her NP hits as hard as it does, because not only does she have a really strong NP as an AoE servant, but she can also back it up with insanely strong crit damage. So it just makes Suzuka Gozen a very, very good AoE servant. The only problem is that she released with Kiara and Melta Lilith, and when Suzuka dropped, she kind of got overshadowed with her being a bit of a wonky servant, but after they buffed up her NP, they buffed up her first skill, and hopefully they buff up her second skill in the future, she's going to get a bit more recognition. And I hope I've kind of like turned a lot of people around on Suzuka. If she's one of those servants you weren't using in your Chaldea or something, hopefully you'll bust her out now. I know that I absolutely love using Suzuka whenever I get the opportunity to use her, and I'm personally really looking forward to Tomamovich dropping on NA so I can actually just really start busting Suzuka out a lot and giving her just the insane support that Tomamovich brings to her. But with all that being said, let me know what you guys think of Suzuka Gozen down in the comments down below. Are you someone that's been using your Suzuka? Are you taking care of the Fox waifu? Or are you being a big bully and you're leaving your Suzuka at level 1 in your Chaldea? In which case, I'm gonna have to come drop kick your entire house into the Earth's crust. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's just gonna happen. But with all that being said, I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace, late guys.